Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on mastering empathy mapping for impactful insights. I'm going to go through a couple of models today, both that have a lot of value, a lot of interesting considerations to them. And what I want to do is be able to show you what it's like to combine them both together and the impact that that can have. So let's get started. By the way, I can see everything in the comments as well. So if you want to be able to drop us a comment, for the last few episodes, sometimes near the end of the episode, they haven't been working, but it should be. So if there's anything you want to say, questions you want to ask, I will be keeping an eye on the comments as we go through. The other thing is, for those of you who haven't met me, hi, I'm Jamie Beaker Brett. I am the founder of Cerebration, and I am a whole brain thinking practitioner. What this means is I help facilitate a model called whole brain thinking, which supports people to understand the cognitive diversity that we see within the workplace and how different thinking preferences impact the way that people connect and work together. But we're going to delve into a bit more detail about what that means and how that might present itself in your workplace. So, a little bit about Cerebration. We support organizations and business leaders, team leaders, to be able to build more cohesive, more coherent teams by understanding and decoding the different ways that people think. We do this through various different methods. Some of them are workshop based. We also deliver a psychometric called HBDI, which essentially helps you measure your different the different thinking preferences within your teams and to what extent each one is present within every individual. And I think that's a really important aspect of cognitive diversity is unlike when we look at some other psychometrics, they're very much about putting you into a box. Our psychometric essentially is being able to go, yes, we have all of these aspects to different extents to different preferences, and that's going to influence the way that we work. But we can also use this as a really useful application model to ensure that when we're designing, that we're building, when we're working together, we take a more holistic approach that takes on board all of these different ways of working. Quite often when we talk about preferences, they often get conflated with ability, and I want to be able to kind of do a bit of defining very early on in this. The best example that I can think of using is David Beckham kicks a football with his right foot. I also kick a football with my right foot. We have the same preference, but a very different ability to kick a football with our right foot. What we're talking today about is around preferences. So not necessarily ability, and there can be a correlation. Generally, we tend to do the things that we prefer more often. So those are the things that we get good at. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are interconnected and entwined to the extent that some people might perceive them to be. So a recent study realized that 31% of advertisements are emotion based, not rational. The data is very functional and rational, but and definitely very impactful as well. Being able to share a story, is able to connect with someone on an emotional level. And the reason that I wanted to be able to bring this up is we're going to be looking at these different dimensions of data orientated. We're going to be looking at the practical approach. We're going to be looking at what's it like to connect with someone on an emotional level, and also what's it like to connect with someone on a more story, theoretical, high concept level as well. So, one of the things that lots of organizations experience when they're trying to do change, when they're trying to do training, when they're working with individuals within an organization, is they don't really capture all of the insights. And this is what we're going to do through empathy mapping. Empathy mapping is really about that process of being able to get into people's heads and to think, how is this person going to be impacted by X, Y, or Z? And quite often, when people don't do these kind of exercises, they miss some really key insights. Things like, what data is available to them. They can have a very inconsistent implementation. They can ignore the emotional impact of these changes, of this training, of this development on the individual. And sometimes that leads to very stifled creative solutions. It lead to people rejecting whatever is being put in front of them. The more we understand how to connect with someone on an empathetic level, the more we're going to be able to create and design something that's fit for purpose, that supports the individual, and also helps us to communicate with them on a level that resonates with that person. So, when can we use empathy mapping? One really important consideration, and where I've used it most often, is when we're communicating change. What we quite often do is we don't acknowledge that we're on a different part of the change process than potentially the people that we're talking to. And what that can lead to is some challenges around we think that something is important, but actually it might be not be important to the audience that we're talking to, or this might be the first time that they've heard it, and that's changing the way that they are interpreting that data. So it's a really useful way of trying to get into people's head as they're experiencing change. We can also do this as part of the learner journey as well. Say we're delivering a training session, we're facilitating. What we might be thinking about is how can we make sure that this learner is going to get what we want from this session, get what they want from this workshop. And the way that we're able to do that is from being able to really think about the emotions that we're trying to create. Learning is a very emotional experience. And what we're trying to do is manipulate those emotions to be able to get a result that's beneficial to ourselves as a facilitator, but also to that learner as well. This is a fantastic exercise if you're doing marketing campaigns, or if it's, working with internal communications, whatever it might be, whether it's external or internal. It helps you to be able to make sure that your message is going to hit clearer with the groups that you're trying to work with, and really target the people on a level that's going to resonate with them. It could be really useful when you're creating things like customer personas as well. If you're starting a new product or you're trying to target a particular demographic, being able to empathy map gives you an idea, an opportunity to kind of delve into their head and make it so it's really accessible and understood to the audience that you're connecting with. This is obviously really helpful when we're doing things like trying to improve team communication, and when we're trying to onboard new employees, where we're trying to understand their experiences, what influences might be having an effect on them as an individual, and potentially how we can manipulate those ones as well. I'll give you a really good example of this. When I started at an organization, I had people that on their first day, I was in charge of doing onboarding within one of the offices that I was at. And on the first day, someone who was a brand new hire spoke to me about the concerns of a change project that happened 3 years prior to their employment. This is on their first day. The legacy of that failed change project was impacting them on the first day they were in the office because of what they were seeing, because of what they were hearing, what influences they were having from other staff. And that is really good information for us for an empathy map, because what we can start to do is have responses to those kind of things. We can also help them to be able to process that information. We can talk about what steps were taken afterwards. But it's really important that we get into people's heads to be able to go, this is what your experience is like. And this, by doing that, it helps us realize how we can change that experience for the better. So, spoken a lot about the concept of empathy mapping. Let's look at the model. This is a really straightforward exercise. Um, and we're going to go into a bit more of a nuanced approach to it in a second. But initially, what we're doing is we're taking someone that we've developed a persona for. It could be a new hire, it could be the person that we're trying to market to, it could be the person, someone in the organization who's going through the change project. Maybe it's your managers or your teams. What we're going to do is we're going to start to go, based on this persona, based on this individual, what are the influences that are impacting them? And we do this on a very sensory level. So the first thing we're looking at is what kind of things are they seeing? What are they observing in the environment that might be visual clues that start to influence how they're experiencing what they're experiencing? So it could be, if they're starting a new organization, it could be posters up about different events. If they are a audience that is, let's say we're looking at Gen Z marketing, maybe it was around Brat Summer. They're seeing all this lime green everywhere. So that's an influence. They're seeing all of these visual clues, and that's going to be an understanding of what they're perceiving within their environment. The next one is, what are they hearing? What are the considerations that they need to take into place that they're being told? It could be conversationally, it could be within the news, it could be within the organization, it could be through communications. But whatever it is, what are the influences that are shaping their perception that they can hear? The next one is say and do, or say and does. I often say and do, but say and does probably grammatically better. So this is, what is that person actually communicating themselves and doing themselves? So what actions are they taking, or what views are they expressing to be able to influence not just themselves but others? Because also this is going to be reinforcing behavior. If they're saying and doing something, then that probably means that that's something that they believe in as well, and they are perpetuating whatever is a message we are trying to communicate. Then we have thinks and feels. So this is the internal thoughts that are driving that person's behaviors, attitudes, really kind of delving into a deeper understanding of their motivations. So this could be the case of they're going, well, I'm going through a new change project. It's just been announced. One of the things that I'm thinking is, I'm a really established member of this team. What happens if I don't get the new system? What happens if all of this competency I've built up isn't valued in the next part? What happens if there's redundancies? That's going to influence how they feel as well. There's that uncertainty, there's that hierarchy of needs that's being challenged. um, and those are going to influence behaviors, potentially influencing what they're saying and doing. It could be the case in that situation, they're going, you know what, I'm going to say that I don't think this change project's a good idea, that it's not going to have the impact that they want, or I've heard it all before, they spoke about doing this change for years and they never do. So we can see how all of these things are interconnected and change the experience. So let's go on to a very practical example. This is a conversation that I have quite frequently with organizations at the moment. Um, so we're going to take AI implementation in the workplace as an example, and we're going to develop an empathy map around it. So the first thing is what they're seeing. Well, let's say they're seeing things in the news about AI. They've been able to see examples of how it's been impacting the work that people are doing. They can see examples when they go onto TikTok. Maybe they follow particular influencers, particular followers. Um, so they can see all of these different information sources about this growing technology. What are they hearing? So they could be hearing about the benefits, they could be hearing about people expressing concerns around it. 300 million jobs at risk of being displaced by AI by the 2030, which is a Goldman Sachs statistic. So they're starting to hear and process some of that information. And they're starting to hear all of these different considerations that are coming into place. Is it ethical? They might have heard drama around OpenAI and Sam Altman and him being removed and added back in, or whatever it might be. So they can hear all of that information as well. They might be voicing some hesitation within meetings. They could see it as a risk to themselves. They could be trying to understand, hey, how's this actually going to change what we're doing? Like, what's going to be the impact to me as an individual? And that's going to be influenced a lot by what they're thinking and feeling. So they could be feeling uncertain, they could be worried about the downside, they wonder if they have the support in place, if there's going to be an opportunity to learn new skills to achieve the change that they're hoping to be able to change. So that could be an influence as well. Fantastic. Cool. Let me just put this. Cool. So that is how we do an empathy map, but we're going to combine that with an additional model now. And the reason we're doing this is because empathy mapping by itself, I think, is a really useful thing if you've got a persona in place, but you can't just do it for one part of demographic. And one of the useful aspects of combining it with the whole brain thinking model is being able to create something that's a bit more astute and really helps you to tailor those messages to make sure that you're hitting the way that everybody thinks. It really targets that think feel section, but making it really individualized and personalized to the different types of thinking that we have. And this way is a much more cognitively inclusive approach. It helps us to make sure that we're supporting the most amount of people possible, because everybody will have different considerations that they have preferences for within this 4 quadrants. So you can see on the 4 quadrant graph, the way that the whole brain model works is it splits people's thinking into 4 quadrants. So our top quadrant in our top left-hand corner is our analytical quadrant. We then have our practical quadrant, which is looking kind of at the step-by-step of things. We have our relational quadrant, which is looking at more of the interpersonal, emotional, sensory considerations. And we have our experimental quadrant, looking more at the high vision thinking, your big picture thinking. You know, when you've been in a team meeting with a yellow because they've gone, you know what, I had this dream the other day and it told me that this would be a great way to be able to go and do that. Or we should just experiment, see how things are going to work out. Or let's just improvise. We'll all be all right on the night. That's very much our yellow kind of thinking. So let's delve into that in a bit more detail. That analytical quadrant is really looking at the logical, technical, financial side of things. In a single word, they are looking for the facts. And realistically, they're looking to the answer for one question. They're looking at what? What is the impact? What is the change? What is the outcome? So we can see that there's a lot of kind of our blue quadrants are really trying to get into that logical, rational way of thinking. Our green quadrant is more looking at the structure. So it's looking at organization, detail, processes. In a single word, you could say it's looking for form. And it's really trying to figure out the answer to the question, how? So how is this going to be done? How are we going to get from point A to point B? How are we going to ensure that everybody is supported? How are we going to make sure that we've allocated resources? That's very much our green way of thinking. Then we have our red quadrant. So our red quadrant is looking at emotional, sensory, people. It's very much that interpersonal, connected consideration. So in a single word, it's looking at feelings, and it's looking to the answer to who. Who's going to be impacted? Who's going to be involved? Who am I going to be on a team with? Who's going to support us? Who's the trainer going to be? Who's going to be leading the change? Very much our red quadrant style of thinking. Then we have our yellow quadrant, which is our risk takers, our intuition, our big picture thinking. Essentially, they are looking at that conceptual future vision. So if I was to describe it in a single word, it would be future. And they're looking to the question to why. Why are we doing this change? Why is this going to change what we're going to do in the future? Why should I care? Why is this going to be meaningful? That's our yellow way of thinking. So I'm going to give you some personas, and we're going to be working with those personas on some empathy mapping. We have our old friend Ben Blue here. So Ben Blue is a data analyst, really struggling with some of that kind of empathy mapping because they like concrete data. They want to be able to have those actionable insights. They want those clear metrics to be able to support the findings. So really looking at the bottom line blue on it. You can see we've got a comment from Penelope being intuitive. Intuitive has a little bit of a red quadrant, a little bit of a yellow quadrant. So we have intuition when it comes to the future and that kind of big picture strategy. I have an idea of what the future is going to look like. And we also have that intuition when it comes to people as well, looking at how we connect on a people internet connected basis, at that empathy bit. And that's really useful from an empathy mapping perspective, as you can imagine. But thank you for sharing that. So Ben is looking into this logical data perspective. So if I was thinking about Ben when it comes to an empathy map, I've created him as my little demographic, and I can go, Ben, my little analytical guy, you are going to see things like the detailed reports. You're going to care about the credentials behind the person saying it. You're going to be looking for the performance metrics. You're going to be looking for those things that are central to decision making. You're also going to be able to hear things like conversations that are focused around accuracy, what stats are available, the logical reasoning behind these decisions. When it comes to saying and doing, you're going to want to be able to give our blue a bottom line information, the precise data. We want to make sure it's grounded in facts. That's what he's going to say, and that's what he's going to be communicating to his team as well. So anything that's ambiguous, that might not be solid, that might be a struggle for Ben Blue to communicate to other people. And they might be thinking, confidence if the decisions are backed by data and logic and rationale, but they probably are going to be quite worried if the decisions are made without that thorough analysis. So if we want to be able to target our message to our Ben Blue, we want to make sure that we do have that solid data background to be able to help that message land for them. So if I go back to the example we were using earlier around AI, if I'm tailoring my empathy map to a Ben Blue, what we're going to do is we want to be able to make sure that they're seeing reports on implementation, that it includes the data, that it looks at efficiency gains, it looks at cost saving, it looks at potential impacts on productivity. That's going to really hit our Ben Blue on a level that's going to get them on board with the communication. Then if we're looking at the hearing side of it, it could be that they're hearing the accuracy of AI algorithms. It could be that they're looking at the right reliability of data being used, the measurable outcomes of integrating AI. So we can think about how we can make sure they're hearing the things that we want them to be able to hear. From a say do perspective, they're going to be asking for clear evidence. They're going to be looking for how it's going to improve performance, how we can make sure that those concerns, those potential risks can be sufficiently analyzed, what kind of way we can make sure that the communication is based in that solid logic, reason, and understanding. And then we're also going to make sure that they're going to feel reassured when the decisions are supported by robust data, that we've considered the financial impact, that we've looked at the operational risks, and make sure that the tools that we're using are thoroughly vetted. So that's going to work for our Ben Blue, but now we're going to come on to our old friend Gina Green. So as a project manager, they're going to make sure that they might find some degree of empathy mapping challenging, but they're going to want a framework, they're going to want a process, they're going to be looking at that efficiency and that effectiveness. You'll see there's a little bit of a crossover between our blues and our greens, but they are definitely separate categories, but there is definitely that intersection on both sides as well. So our Gina Green is looking to be able to have well-organized plans. They want the detailed timelines. They want the structured workflows. They want to know what tasks are going to be impacted. They're going to want to know how they're going to get people up to speed, how things are going to change. So let's look at making sure that when they're seeing these things, we're giving them this data in terms of the process and the structure of what's changing. When it comes to our greens as well, we're going to be looking at ensuring that they're hearing that there's practical implementation guides, that we're going to talk about the sequencing of tasks, we're going to give them agendas, we're going to give them schedules. That's going to really connect with our greens. When we're looking for our say do's, we're going to hear them asking for the detailed steps. You're going to hear them emphasizing the importance of following these procedures. So that's going to be what we're going to be noticing from our greens. And it's really useful to codify people within this way, because we see this in people's language all the time. I bet you can think to yourself right now and go, I know a green in my life. I know a blue in my life. I know a red in my life as well, because those preferences dictate everything that we do. Then we also have our thinking and feeling as well. So they're going to feel comfortable when the plans are organized, when schedules are stick to, when we're not concerning them by going off the rails, and any potential disruptions are mitigated and supported. So that's going to really reassure our greens as part of our empathy mapping process. So if I was doing this from an AI perspective, we're going to be including those detailed plans on where AI is going to be looked at, the process it's going to impact, how it's going to impact them. We're also going to look at things like making sure that they have discussions, opportunities to discuss the practical steps needed for adoption. We're going to make sure that we can focus on that sequencing, our plans, the way to make sure we have that follow-up structured approach that's going to make them feel reassured. You're going to see them asking for those step-by-step plans. You're going to see them emphasizing the importance of following procedures to be able to minimize that disruption. And what they're going to think and feel is they're going to feel comfortable when this is all well organized and planned, but they're going to worry if there's a chaos or missed deadlines, or if your message isn't clear. So we want to be able to make sure we can reassure them by making those communications very easy to understand, where it's not abstract, where it's not sitting in the ether, but feels very tangible. Then we have Roger Red. So Roger Red, empathy mapping sometimes overlooks some of the crucial aspects of design. So they really want tools that are there to be able to help them kind of capture these emotions in a way that's meaningful. They're looking for that interconnectedness. They're looking for those kind of examples to be able to relate with people. So if I'm looking at my red impact, we're going to see them thinking of the decisions on team dynamics. We're going to see them thinking about the relational impact. We're going to think of them being very in tune with the emotional climate, the culture within the office. Those things are going to be really impactful on our reds. We're also going to They're going to hear conversations around those people's feelings, the interconnected relationships, potentially around the different hierarchies that are there and the social impact of some of these decisions. We're going to hear them talking about and doing things that are going to be reassuring team individuals, emphasizing the importance of considering people's emotional state, where they're very generally tend to have a lot of emotional intelligence within that space. So they're going to be looking at this approach to really connect with people. And then we're going to go, when they're looking at what they're thinking, what they're feeling, they're really concerned about the feelings of others. Your reds generally tend to be the case of they're not just doing something for themselves, but they're doing it for their colleagues, their friends, their family. It generally tends to weave into a lot of a net of people. So they're going to be worried about the potential negative impacts on those decisions on the team, but also that wider network as well. So if we were to apply this to AI implementation, this could be, some of the impacts on team dynamics. It could be the job security that people are experiencing, the emotional well-being of their colleagues. That's going to be the big changes that they're going to see, and that's going to affect how they show up within the space. We're going to hear the concerns around how it might be affecting interpersonal relationships, the sense of community within the workplace. Little bit tidbit, slight of a side road to go down, but the highest growth area for AI is not content generation, as many people think it is. It's actually in connected relationships. Character AI is one of the fastest growing AIs out there, and actually some of those interconnectedness is people are having more personalized relationships and connections within that AI space. So, something that's an interesting consideration to be able to bring on board, but slight sidetrack, bringing it back in. So we're going to see what they're saying and doing. So they're going to be asking about how individuals are going to be impacted on a personal level. We're going to emphasize the need of the considerations around those emotions, that relational impact. And some of the things they're going to be thinking and feeling is they're going to be worried about how AI is going to disrupt their team cohesion. They're going to be concerned about the emotional impact that this implementation is going to take on the people around them. So that's going to start to really impact the way that they show up and connect within these spaces. Finally, we have Yara Yellow. So Yara is our big picture strategic experimental thinker, really looking at innovation, creativity, those future focused insights. So Yara is going to see opportunities for innovation. She's going to see these creative solutions, some of these ideas around this big picture impact. That real improvisational, let's wing it kind of approach sometimes. That you're going to hear some of the conversations about new ideas, future possibilities, the strategic direction that these things could be taken in. They're going to be asking for the potential around innovation. They're going to emphasize the importance of that out the box thinking in order to explore these new opportunities. And they're also going to be feeling excited about the possibilities for the future, motivated where the big picture vision and creative ideas could lead to. So if we were taking that and we applied it to our AI example, they're going to see AI as a catalyst for innovation. They're going to see the ways, new possible opportunities to explore this in the workplace. They're going to hear discussions about the future of AI, including how it could revolutionize processes, how it could drive strategic growth. They're going to be asking about how their organization is going to push the boundaries. They're going to emphasize the importance of experimenting, of trying new things, of new technologies. They're the early adopters, so you're going to see that in their behavior. When it comes to thinking and feeling, they're going to feel excited about these creative possibilities that AI could bring, and they're going to be motivated by the future vision of these advancements and opportunities. So, when doing empathy mapping, here are the considerations broken down by the quadrant. If we're trying to target our blues, we want to be able to think about our data metrics, our quantitative support, our analysis, our clarity. If we're targeting our greens, we're thinking about the framework, the structure, the organization, and the sequences that we do things in. If we're looking to support our reds, we're looking at the emotional impact, the sentimentality, we're going to be looking at that interpersonal focus and some of those sensory details as well. And if we're looking at our yellows, we're going to be looking for innovation, creativity, future vision, experimentation, strategic alignment. So that very much kind of ties up how we're looking to support people. But we shouldn't necessarily just look at this by quadrant boxes and go, well, this is for our reds, this is for our yellows. A good communication plan, a good way of doing anything is to go, we need to have something for every one of these boxes in here. There's not one quadrant that's better than another quadrant. If you truly want to bring people on the journey with you, you need to have something for everything that appeals for the different ways that people process information. And this is where this is a really useful exercise. So if you want to make sure that you're really hitting those messages in the right way, we want to be telling people around our blue quadrants, around that data insight, quantitative controls, metrics, things like that. Our greens, the frameworks, our task sequence, our methodology, our process steps. Our reds, those emotional cues, feedback, interpersonal stories, and that empathy mapping process can be really useful as well. And for our yellows, we're going to be looking at those creative ideas, that innovation, the techniques that come along with innovation, some vision mapping, and some strategic models as well. So that's the end of today's session. Thank you so much for joining. If you want to be able to learn more about this and start to take this journey a little bit further, you can you can measure your approach to inclusion by going to celebration.scorecard.com. We have a little assessment there that can help you measure your team's approach to inclusion. If it comes to whole brain thinking resources, do follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn. Both of those we have guides that come out on a weekly basis that apply whole brain thinking to different topics, different ways of working. If you're interested in having a whole brain analysis for you, you can always DM me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Jamie Beekoff Brett. I'm more than happy to be able to help you on that journey as well. And you can obviously watch our webinars, both our upcoming live ones and previous ones that we've done on youtube.com/@cerebrationedu. There's another example that I want to be able to give you really quickly as well, just to be able to help if anyone's interested in learning more about this or seeing it applied. I have a couple of tools that are on my website that use AI to be able to support people to do empathy mapping in a very quick space time. So let me stop sharing this screen and start sharing the next one. So on the website here, you can check out both the personalized brand analysis and our lesson plan creator have free tools attached to them to be able to do empathy mapping. Both of them consist of an empathy map looking at either your audience or the students that you're working with. So if you want to be able to have a look at exploring how generative AI can benefit you and how you can apply it to some of the topics that we're talking about, check out beakoffbrett.net/session plan session plan V1. At the moment, this takes a text input and it creates it into a document for you. But we also have versions of it coming out that will take a voice note and utilize it to be able to develop these documents as well. So do give those an experimentation. Thank you so much for your joining. Thank you so much for some of the nice comments that we have as well. Really appreciate you coming on the journey, learning a little bit more about this. If you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. And once again, have a wonderful day and look forward to catching you all very, very shortly. Thank you very much.